The perception we have of Gen Z is that they are lazy, entitled, don't have any work ethic. In reality, we just don't know how to manage them.
Heather Elkington, she's back. Leadership coach, author, and TEDx speaker. She's here with a fresh take on how to step up your leadership game.
The word manager needs a rebrand. We have some negative connotations towards it, like Karen vibes. If you are a manager and you don't care about growth, you're in the wrong job. So many of our issues in life could have been solved by having a difficult conversation. Emotional intelligence is a skill that we can learn. There's a 5-step framework to being quote unquote emotionally intelligent. And the first step in that framework is,
how do you reconcile what the company is saying their core values are to what they're actually doing? Hello, my fellow leaders. Welcome back to Anatomy of a Leader with me, Maria Vorostovsky. I'm an executive headhunter, career coach, and host of the show. Here, we talk about how to find your calling, how to succeed in business, and how to live well whilst doing so. I am bringing Anatomy of a Leader live to a venue in London. If you'd like to be the first to find out about it, please make sure that you follow the link in the show notes to be added to the waitlist. And don't forget to subscribe or follow the show wherever you're listening. Heather.
hello.
Hello. Welcome back to Anatomy of a Leader.
It's an honor here. I think this was one of my favourite podcasts I've ever been on.
Well, thank you for saying that.
I just remember last time we finished the episode, I just felt like really energized and I felt like we could have spoke for hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, so much more to cover.
Absolutely. And so much has happened since I've seen you, even though it's not even been a year, I think.
No, not really.
You did a TED talk.
Yes.
About Gen Z being lazy.
Yeah. The opposite. About us thinking the perception we have of Gen Z is that they are lazy, entitled, don't have any work ethic. And in reality, we just don't know how to manage them.
How was the experience of being on the TED Talk?
I was so nervous.
Were you?
Yeah, I haven't been that nervous in a while. I think I was so caught up in it has to be perfect. I mean, thousands of people on YouTube are going to see it. TEDx have got however many subscribers, millions of subscribers. And my family came to the physical event.
So they were there watching you?
Family, friends came to the physical event. So I was super nervous. I had prepared so much, like really over-prepared, learn everything as a script. Just honestly, so prepared. But I was shaking backstage, like 10 minutes before I was due to go on. You kind of sit towards the back of the stage and you watch the previous person, you see them introduce you, and I was just like shaking so much. Yeah, I haven't watched it back and will not watch it back.
Oh, I think you should. It's what is it called? Exposure therapy.
Yeah.
Because it is awkward watching yourself.
I don't mind watching. I've got really used to watching myself. It's just that particular talk, I saw it as, I always think when we do things, you just have to do version 1. Like you've got to get the first one of it done. It was the same when I was posting. I'm on probably number 200 of Instagram posts right now. Yeah. Number 1 was scary. Number 10 was okay. Number 200, I'm not nervous. I have different feelings, but I'm not nervous. And it was the same with the TEDx talk. It was like over the course of my career, whether 10, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever this looks like, I want to do many more TEDx talks on topics that I've researched, that I love, that I want to share with the world. And I just had to do that first one.
Yeah, just get it out of the way.
Exactly. Yeah, I just had to feel the nerves, just get on the stage and do it anyway, and it's done. And I guarantee next time I will not be anywhere near as nervous because I have the evidence now. I was fine. I was okay when I went on stage. You survived it. Exactly. I survived it. Yeah. I remembered all my words. I wasn't embarrassed. It was okay. And even if I hadn't have rehearsed or remembered my words, it would have still been okay. So yeah.
I did this comedy acting course, which was 6 weeks on Saturdays. And there was, in the middle of it, there's only 10 of us in the class, or even less than that. And the exercise was everyone's lined up sitting down, and then you go up on your stage. And all you have to do is just you walk in the middle in front of everyone and look every single person who's looking at you in the eye and acknowledge them. Yeah. And then afterwards say, "Hello, my name is Maria," and say something boring. it was so nerve-wracking, even though we like spent so much time together. Just that moment of having to engage with every single person and just be neutral and say something in a neutral way.
Mm-hmm.
It was excruciating. And it was almost like a therapy session from the lady that was from our teacher. And she said, look, you are enough. Just you standing there, like, you're enough. And I was like, this is a therapy session happening now. But yeah, it's
much
tough
needed
being on stage.
That's true. And I guess it's the same in leadership as well. Same in management. When you get promoted, so when you go on that stage for the first time, you get promoted into that management role for the first time, you are already enough. You're not being put in that position because someone has said, I can see that in a few years you'll be enough or you'll be ready, so let's start nurturing you now. That generally happens before. When you get put in that role, someone's saying to you, exactly who you are right now is a leader. And okay, skills might need nurturing, but you're ready. You're ready to be in that role. And so often when people go into the first management role, it's the first time, they're very new to it, we always think, but when I gain this skill, I'll feel like a leader. When I know this thing, I'll feel like a leader. When I've fired someone, I don't know, I'll feel like a leader. And it's just all wrong. Everything you are in that moment is already a great leader. And we don't necessarily need to be more. Mm-hmm. We just need to accept we're never going to be perfect. And actually new managers, because of that, because they're more self-aware, can be a lot stronger than some leaders who have been in the positions for decades, because if we're not careful, we become complacent. Not always true, but I've seen it happen. If we're not careful, we become complacent, we stop learning, we stop investing in ourselves and our skills. And so then the person who's coming new, who's super self-aware, ready to learn, ready to grow, understand their team deeper, etc., might actually be a better leader than someone who's been doing it for decades.
I've heard about a different way of looking at imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. Instead of it being something that's debilitating and why can't I just think confident thoughts and be all knowledgeable, actually it's a thing that pushes you to question yourself, like, am I doing the right thing, to prepare better, to just be better at the thing that you are worried about. It's actually a superpower.
Fuel.
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to being complacent and being like, well, I know everything, I just come in and, the know-it-all, mm-hmm. instead of thinking, maybe I'm not doing quite the right thing, or have I not seen it from a different perspective?
Yeah.
So yeah.
100%. So in my course, I always encourage people to see whatever their vulnerability is. This is one of the first things we go through. Whatever your biggest vulnerability is right now, whether it's your age, whether it is your skill set, it could be anything that you feel really vulnerable about in the workplace, that flipped on its head is your biggest superpower. And especially when it comes to being new into a role, it doesn't last long. Like, you're only new you can only call yourself new for a couple of years at max. Yeah. And so harness it, grab it, take control of it, just appreciate, I am new. I am here to be the new leader, to be self-aware, to accept I don't know everything, to grow, bring fresh new skills to the team. So
beginner's mind.
100%. Mm-hmm. It's your biggest superpower. Whatever and whatever that vulnerability is. So for me, it was my age for a long time. It may be being female. Like, I've been in some rooms where I felt really vulnerable, like being the only woman there, and being amongst a group of men who didn't understand the complexities of how, I wanted to just stand up and go to everyone, can you not see that this is weird? The fact that there's 20 of you and one of me. Does this not even cross your mind? But of course it doesn't. So
Have you actually said that?
No. I've never stood up and said that.
Yeah.
I've pointed it out to a company before who I didn't work for. So there was a corporate who were in line to buy Go Proposal. So not Sage, a completely different company. And when we were doing the pitching, so we pitched to quite a lot of companies, and then when you go through the sale process of a company, you will generally pitch to, for us it was 5 to 6 companies, and then you go through to final stages where people put bids in, you can negotiate, etc. And we got to the very final stages with a few companies, and one of them, we were pitching in a room down in London. Not only was I the only female in the room, but there were also, I want to say there was 12 people in that room, but there was also 20, 30 people on Zoom who were kind of listening in. Nobody, apart from me, was female. So I raised it afterwards. I didn't say anything in the meeting. To be honest, it didn't really cross... It crossed my mind, but it didn't really I just got on with it. We had a big job to do, so I just got on with it. But then afterwards, when that company went forward to try and buy ours, I sent them a document where I was like, these are the reasons why I wouldn't be happy, our team merging into yours, because that room I was in, okay, they had said to us at one point that they had really great kind of diversity and inclusion and that they had a 50-50 split with women in the team. Okay, but not with your decision makers. You can say you've got 50% women in your team, but they're all junior, because I'm in a room with all the decision makers on how you spend tens of millions of pounds to bring in new companies, and there's not a single other female voice in this room. So yeah, I've been in that scenario many times, and I actually sent them a document afterwards of things that really concerned me, because there was just it was me, there was two of us selling the company, me and the founder. And when we were in that room, so the founder's a man, when we were in that room, I would ask questions and their answers would be directed to him. And it was so obvious to me, but not obvious to James. And it's the only kind of thing, only when you are in the minority do you realise.
Absolutely. I'm reading Mary Ann Siegart's book, The Authority Gap.
Nice.
Which explores all of that. And I really hope to have her on the show, because my God, I'm halfway through that book and it's depressing. And there is a chapter, I think it's called, don't despair or something, or all is not lost. So I haven't got around to it yet, because I really want to hear what the solutions are, because this, having so many women on the show and hearing the same thing over and over, how do we address that? Or not even we,
It's do you know what? This is one of the questions I get asked that I actually have to put my hands up and say, I'm not sure I have it necessarily figured out or have the solution yet, because I think, so the question being, and a woman came up to me after a talk I did in April, I think it was. She came up to ask me a question afterwards, and she told me she was facing what she felt was quite a lot of discrimination at work. And it was all very underhanded. So it wasn't this is when discrimination is really tough, because it isn't just someone directing words at you that are very easily evidence for discrimination. It's more like when you're the only woman in a meeting and you're expected to take notes, when you're expected to essentially run faster to get to the same place. Me and my friend Abby, who's also a brilliant female business owner, were having the conversation this morning about how, so I'm coming to this podcast that I'm excited to be on. I want to look my best for the camera. You want to feel your best, dress well. It takes me a good 2 hours from the moment I get in the shower to doing my hair, putting my makeup on, finding something I want to wear, making sure that when I get here, I've got powder on my face, it's not oily, I smell nice. Do you think a man does any of that? No. When they come on the podcast?
I can attest.
Exactly.
They do something, but not 2 hours worth of preparation.
Exactly.
No.
And I'm sure you probably do something similar when you come on camera as well. And so if you multiply that, okay, that's one scenario where I'm on a podcast. If you multiply that by every time I have an important meeting at work, or every time I record a video, which is almost daily, every time I go out for dinner to networking event, I have to go through that 2 hours, and I'm definitely not alone in that, because this is what me and Abby were talking about. And we both looked at each other and was like, what's the solution? The absolute fierce feminist in me says, don't wear the makeup, don't get ready, don't do those things, and start pushing back. But I can't, because I know the day I started doing those things, and I know this, it really saddens me to say, but the videos would get less views. People, if I started turning up in my dressing gown, or maybe it wouldn't get, maybe people are like, what is going on? But if I started turning up to podcasts without my hair brushed and looking not meeting a certain beauty standard, sadly, the views go down, and I've experienced it myself. And if you don't turn up in a certain way to a meeting, it might just be that you don't feel your most confident. It could be that like the amount of times I've seen this play out to me and people at work, when a woman turns up with no makeup on, and I've seen this happen to friends over and over again. They're like, I'm not doing it today. I'm not putting makeup on. I've not got time. I don't want to. And they turn up and I'm like, yes, go you. Someone will go, you look a bit tired today. Are you okay? And it's like, what do we do? You know, and I wish I had the strength in me to be the person who pushes back. Isn't
it interesting? Because yes, it is something that you are judged by how you look as a woman, and you are perceived more successful and healthier if you adhere to traditional female look standards. So, you know, having your makeup on, being a certain weight, having certain hair color, skin, eyes, etc. You are perceived as a more, I don't want to say credible, but you
valuable.
are valuable. And hence more interesting, and like some people should listen to you. And Marion Sieghardt talks about the pitch of your voice. And if you're perceived as a feminine woman, you have more persuasive power over men. If you act submissive, if you act more dainty, you have more of a chance to persuade a man than if you are more bossy, aggressive, shrill, as they call it. And isn't that fascinating that if you embody the qualities of what's perceived great in a man, that penalizes you as a woman. And so you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. So yes, if you wear makeup and then you feel better about yourself, you're perceived better, you're less inclined to want to do it, which means other women are less inclined to do it. So overall, we never really break that perception of, yes, in order to be taken seriously, you need to have your makeup on. So it's a fascinating...
It's really tough.
Yeah.
It's really tough. I'd say that the things I have started to do, I guess, that are acts of like what I would call micro-feminism, where it's like things I can do day to day that help women around me feel more comfortable. Because being completely honest, I would love nothing more than to turn up to work every day, to film every video, to go on every podcast with greasy hair and no makeup on. Like, I really dislike the process of washing, drying, straightening, doing all that crap to my hair. But I haven't quite mentally got there yet, and I don't think it would serve me well. But things I do and really kind of take power on is I talk about periods a lot. Like, I talk about periods a lot at work and with the women at work and in front of the men. Like, I don't care if you feel awkward, I'm going to talk about it. Whenever people talk about children and the idea of like maternity and maternity leave in work and people coming back to work, men so often will weigh in on the conversation with something that, unless they are really educated, like have really gone out of their way to educate themselves on it, generally isn't helpful. And I'll just try to be like, can we actually ask the people who are birthing the child, please? Can we actually ask the people who are, generally responsible for 90% of caregiving responsibility? And so whilst the things that annoy me the most, that do mean I have to run twice as fast as a man to get anything done, I haven't quite got a solution for yet. But there are ways, they're kind of like acts of microfeminism at work. Like, if you have any control over toilets, put tampons in all the toilets, even the men's toilets. Just get them looking at them, get them thinking about them. Like, I don't think people understand. There's a report from Deloitte that came out recently. They interviewed, I can't remember, thousands of women. 40% of people who have menstrual pain say that pain is severe, so severe, and they just work through it because there's no solution. How many times do you ever hear of a woman that takes a day off for a period? Like, my period's awfully painful in the first day. I don't think I've ever skipped work for it. I remember being at school, being sat in a maths class at school, and my back pain hurt so much I had to get one of my friends to like stab a hand into the back of my back because I was in so much pain. Yeah, I'm just still doing my maths GCSE. it's like, again, we're just having to run faster to get to the same place. The guy who sat next to me, I got an A star in maths. The guy who sat next to me also got an A star in maths. He didn't have to sit there in severe pain, getting their friend to massage their back, you know. So I don't know as I have a solution other than keep talking about it, like keep shining the spotlight on these things, having these conversations, trying to get men educated and involved. And I do think men more now than ever want to get involved. A lot of my clients, who are male business owners, senior male leaders, are aware that they need to do something about this, whereas I would have said even just 5 to 10 years ago, when I was first in the workplace, I never got that feeling. So now they're very much like, we want to help, we want paternity leave to be extended. We want, just keep having the conversations.
No, for sure. Is it something that you think is changing within Gen Z? Do you think they're more attuned to creating more gender parity?
I think they're more polarized. So I would say the more liberal, absolutely fiercely yes, more than ever before. However, we also have the rise of Andrew Tate,
trad wives, everything else that like goes into the other category that is also super strong. And I think this is what social media has done, is it gives everyone a community and a home for their beliefs, which has a lot of positives, but it is also a lot easier for young boys, young men to access this kind of Andrew Tate dangerous world of So I think the section of Gen Z that want that is fiercer than ever before, and I put my faith in them. I've heard some good stories from schools recently, some really nice stories from schools about how kids are starting to be a lot more in tune to just like differences. So it could be learning difficulties, LGBTQ children, like how kids, I've heard some really good stories about how kids are really starting to understand those things. So yeah, we'll see. So going back to your TED Talk and talking about Gen Z, and you're saying they are not lazy. What are they?
So the thing I think we need to understand about Gen Z, I say Gen Z, and I think it's because I've only heard them referred to on TikTok in an American accent. So I'm just going to go with Gen Z. I'm just going to go with Gen Z. So the thing we have to understand about Gen Z is they have been brought up with social media. So for me, I'm 29 years old, so I'm a young millennial. Actually, if you look at some studies, my birth year is on the cusp. So I'm 1995. So right on the cusp of Gen Z millennial. And social media only came into my life really when I was like right at the end of school, so year 11, year 12. For Gen Z, they have been brought up with social media. So if we think about like false versions of reality, filtered versions of success, like unrealistic ideals of success, relationships. I always think about relationships online, like think about how many influencers you follow who you see their home and their relationship with their partner and you're like, oh, I wish my house looked like that. I wish my relationship was that nice. You're seeing 1% of what is going on behind the scenes. I guarantee your favorite influencers are also arguing over who's doing the dishes, arguing over who like took the most of the bed up last night, and they're the reason we've got no sleep, and the house is messy, and they just move things around to record a video. Yet Gen Z have been brought up in a world where what they see, their versions of reality is social media versus what's going on at home. So I think they're starting to also now see that a lot of what's on social media is bullshit. I think they have learned to smell out bullshit and inauthenticity from a mile off because they've grown up with it. Like they've seen it on their phone every single day. And so like if I think about the influencer, to me, like my idea of a quote unquote influencer was sort of the don't know, I'm going to say like Mrs. Hinch's of the world, who very clean home. I used to think, oh my God, I wish my home was this clean. That was like the first indication I had of an influencer that I like looked up to. Whereas now I think Gen Z and TikTok especially, it's more, we need authenticity. Like we're craving, give it back to us, because all we've seen for the past 10 years while I've been growing up is fakeness, unrealistic ideals of success, etc. So give us something real. So that's where I start when it comes to Gen Z. And I think leadership as a whole doesn't suit that right now. So we see a lot of intransparency, is that a word? We see a lot of lies, a lot of like, we don't trust teams, so we kind of give them this fluffy solution. We give them this, say we bring them back into the office for 5 days a week, like Amazon have just done, instead of explaining that we're fearful, you know, we don't know what to do, we really want to bring you in. They just create this like bullshit version of reality, which is we want more collaboration, we want people to feel safe in an office. And it's like, just tell the truth. Because Gen Z hear that and switch off. They hear, I don't know, core values coming from global, or this is what we want the vision of the company to be, when they're sat in the office and they see the complete opposite. And it's just like, well, I don't believe you anymore. And so I think when we say the word lazy, for me, it's just like, I imagine someone sat just completely glazed over, switched off, like, I don't believe you anymore. Stop telling me these things. I come here to get my wage paid. I know you're lying to me. I know you're giving me empty promises. I'm going to stop believing them. So lazy's the wrong word. I do think less engaged, 100%, but I don't think it's unsolvable.
So if Gen Z are not lazy and they disengaged, are not motivated, and let's face it, it's the millennials and probably boomers managing them, is it something that they're doing wrong when it comes to leading them?
Yeah. So there's a really great book called No Rules Rules, which was written by one of the co-founders of Netflix, Reed Hastings. And in that book, he explains how Netflix was going through some real issues in the early days. They were up against the likes of Blockbuster. Their culture was under fire. They weren't making enough money to... they were growing really, really fast. And all the cultural systems that they had in place were just kind of falling down. They had to make some huge changes to make that company as scalable as it is today. And one of the changes that Reed Hastings outlines is that in order to get their team thinking and acting like entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, they had to treat them like entrepreneurs. So what was happening, and what happens in most big companies, if not and small ones, is they close off the books. So they close off the profit, the P&L, the true numbers. So like the customers we're bringing in, the customers we're losing, the money we're spending, etc. They keep that away from the team because it's scary. We don't want them to see, we don't want that level of transparency. It's too scary. But then we expect our team to be making decisions. We kind of look to them and think, why didn't you think about that before you made that decision? Or why can't you make a decision for yourself? But we've closed them off from all of the information they need to use to make a decision. So one of the first things I always recommend, if our team are disengaged and they don't care about the business, they don't care about KPIs, is really open up the books to be as transparent as possible. Do what Netflix did. So Netflix ended up sending around a report every single month. So every single employee, no matter where they were in the company, could see the P&L. So they could see the profit, the loss, everything they were spending money on, everything they were bringing in. And it meant that the teams, the middle managers, the people who had ordinarily been switched off from the business side of things could now make decisions based on, okay, if I do X, this is how it's going to impact Y. And ultimately, like if you go a bit deeper, in our head, what that says is, if I can make more money for the company, I can get paid more, and I can progress more. And that's ideally what we want. We want everyone to have that clear progression path, but they can't see it. You know, we're not making it transparent enough for them. So firstly, I would go there. Secondly, when we need to remotivate and re-engage our team, the word motivation comes from like the root word of motive. So it's literally moving forward. So we can't feel motivated if we are not moving forward in something. So if we have got a person that is stuck doing the same tasks every single day, there's no plan of progression, the company's not moving forward in any way, you have got no chance of getting them motivated. But we have to get them feeling that forward movement in something. And that could be anything from their pay to skills, like, you know, what are they looking to develop in their skill set? How can we help them get there? Could we get them some training? Could we coach them internally? It could be that they are looking, you know, if you start to really dig in with your team, you could understand that you might find that one person wants to be moving forward with the freedom of their life. So maybe they've been in a career for a couple of decades and they're at the point now where they want more freedom, they want more time with their kids, they want more time at home, anything. That's something we can give them. So it might be like, okay, you want to move forward with how free you feel in your life. What do we need to do to create that? Do you need to have flexi hours? Do you need to work from home more? Do you want to work 4 days a week, compress your hours, or just do 4 days a week? You know, when we start digging into like what people actually want, and all we have to do is get them moving forward in that thing and progressing towards that thing. Ideally, it's salary. We always want people to be progressing in the salary. But if the hard reality is we cannot increase the salary, and that might be because the company has no money, or so often it's just because as a manager, you might not have control over that. So if you're in a corporate, I've seen this happen time and time again. You just physically you can't put someone's salary up until maybe the next pay run. Mm-hmm. So if you cannot put the salary up, that would be ideal. If you can't put the salary up, what else can we get them moving forward in? Find out what it is they want from their career, from their life, and help them move forward in that thing.
One of the things that managers of Gen Z complain about is like the expectation of the Gen Z that they're going to be progressing really quickly. So the speed at which they expect that change to happen isn't in line with what the manager or the company is able to provide. Like, how do you reconcile that? Because for a manager, it's like, you understand, yes, of course, progression is important, but I literally cannot offer that to you. Mm-hmm. What do you do in that case?
So I would, first of all, just understand and empathize a little bit. So always come from the place of Gen Z if your Gen Z employee is doing that and they expect way too much, way too soon, just first start to think like, let's empathize. Where's that coming from? The speed at which the world is moving forward in general is just getting faster and faster and faster. If you think the Industrial Revolution was only 130 years ago, the world today is moving at an intense pace that nobody is in control of. And so we just apply that to our children and our employees and younger people in general. I can see where that's coming from. However, to bring those expectations back into alignment, I think I would always put the accountability in their hands. So I would say to them, say your Gen Z employee comes to you and says, I don't know, maybe you've employed them on 28K. And they're in a junior role and whatever, they're on 28 grand. And they come to you and say, this time next year, I want to be on 40 grand. And what I would then say to them is, so the value you're bringing to the company at the minute is X, Y, and Z. You need to increase your value to a 40 grand pay ticket. And if I just put this, it's really easy to explain in terms of a sales role. So if someone comes to you and says, I'm earning 28 grand next year, I want to be earning 40 grand, you can just say, okay, well, how are you going to bring that extra 12 grand a year? And it's more than that with costs, etc. How are you going to bring that extra 20 grand a year into the business? Because if you can do that, I can pay you 40 grand. In fact, if you can bring 100 grand into the business, I can pay you 50 grand. So maybe put the accountability into their hands to say, and this again will be much more transparent. It will help them to gain some business acumen. But just to say to them, okay, if that's the progression you want, how are you going to bring that value to the business? And then once they start working that out, you can say to them, I think it's more realistic that you look at that over 2 years. I absolutely want you to progress, but we have to keep your expectations in line. And a lot of the damage is done when we don't have that conversation up front. One of my clients recently, he is having to go back to his team member to say, you know, that thing I promised you, we can't do it anymore. Don't overpromise. Like, it goes back to a value that I hold very dear in life, which is always do what you say you're going to do. And it's just having a very strong word, like always following through with your word. But that value of always do what you say you're going to do starts a lot earlier, because it starts with don't promise things you can't do. So don't say yes to commitments if you know you are not going to be able to do them. And so that's a value I have. Always do what you say you're going to do. If you know when that person comes to you, you can't progress them that fast. Always just have that conversation really honestly up front.
On the note of managing the Gen Z, saying, well, if you can bring in 20K extra into the business, then I can increase your salary. What if they're not in a position in a sales role or a marketing role or any kind of revenue driving growth? I mean, say they're a PA or an assistant, like how, you know, even for them, they'll be like, I've only been in this company for, I don't know, a couple of years. I have no idea even how to create that kind of a growth or create that kind of money. How do you handle that?
So if someone's coming to you with these bigger expectations, they are obviously someone who is growth orientated. That is going to be what motivates them. That's what they want out of their career. Because you also will have people who don't want that, who success to them isn't climbing up a ladder or getting more money, and that's okay. But if you have someone sat in front of you who success to them is they want to grow their salary, they want to grow their responsibility, etc., then you've got a person who actually, I would argue, is easier to manage, because you understand their motivations and you do have the means to help them get there. So I would use that as an opportunity. So say you're in a situation, you've got let's say PA, because I was a PA, love that role. And I was getting paid when I had my first PA job in London, 23K, I want to say. If I'd have gone to my boss and said, and I didn't because I was a pushover at this time, but I should have, if I'd have gone to my boss and said, I want to be paid 30 grand, I would have expected, if I was that boss, go back to me and say, okay, in order to get you to that, I need you to be able to, and this is what a PA's role essentially is, to take more off me. And it might be that you take it on, or you delegate it to other people, or you automate it, or you outsource it, so that I am freed up to do more valuable work, so that I can bring more revenue into the business. Or, you know, someone else in the team needs to be freed up to do X, Y, Z. So what is it? Let's talk about it together. And I would say, because you have a growth-oriented person, that is a really powerful conversation to have with them, because you're also giving them freedom, autonomy, you're giving them an opportunity to like get involved in business behind the scenes. This is exactly what my leader at the time did to me, not necessarily with salary, but he gave me the opportunity to just learn so much about business. And I saw that as that was one of the first early career wins I had, because I was the essentially right-hand woman to a CEO who was incredibly busy, and I got to understand and learn like the back-end workings of a small business. And so I would just see that as a great opportunity to like, right, we've got a growth-oriented person here. They want to grow their salary. It's not realistic today, but if they want to get there by this time in 6 months or this time next year, let's decide together how they can do that. And it could be that they free up other people, they automate some processes, they systemize something, bring in a new piece of software that streamlines a process, anything, but just there's always a way. And people are too quick to say no to a pay review conversation. We've not got the budget, we've not got any money, let's talk about it next year. In fact, use it as an opportunity to empower that person and say, I'll be honest, we don't have the budget right now. However, there's a couple of things that we can work on together, so that when we have this conversation in 6 months, I can say yes to you. We need to just put a couple of measurables in place. That's the better conversation to have. Mm-hmm. Because then and just make sure that those measurables are things that will grow the value of the business and that mean you can afford it in 6 months.
Mm-hmm. I think between the lines, I think what you're saying is that the manager themselves needs to have a growth mindset, because in order to have that conversation with the person who you manage. You need to be thinking like that yourself.
If you are a manager and you don't care about growth, you're in the wrong job. The word manager needs a rebrand. I think we have some negative connotations towards it, like Karen vibes, like ask the manager. We think the manager is...
It's like I'm here holding this team and managing the team.
And micromanage, and like the word manage just has so many negative connotations. And actually what I see management as is like, say if I have 6 or 7 human beings in my team, how do I say it? Some of them will be with me a short time, maybe 1-2 years. Some of them will be with me a long time, maybe 10-20 years. But for however long they are with me, how do I get the best out of them and help them to become the absolute best versions of themselves? And if you are in a management position and you are not thinking like that, you need to leave, because you are it might be that your mindset is more scarcity one, where you are thinking about competition and you want to hold people back because you're worried they're going to outgrow you. You are in the wrong job, or you need some therapy or some serious coaching to help you get out of that mindset. Management is all about getting people to grow, to overtake you. Like, my absolute ideal with my team now would be for them to be so much better than me at everything I do that they don't need me anymore, and I can pay them 10 times what they're already paid because they've created a business that doesn't need me. And that is my mission over the next, it might take 5 years, 10 years, whatever, but I'd love that to be where they get to for them. So yeah, if you're a manager that's the opposite of growth orientated, you really need to do some inner work or take a step back from the role, because you're going to cause a lot of harm.
The example that we just explored is a Gen Z employee coming to their manager and saying, look, I want to grow. I'm motivated. Like, what do I need to do in order to get the salary? What if you're dealing with somebody who isn't like that, who is not working independently, who actually isn't thinking for themselves?
Again, accountability to the manager. I always look to myself and think, if I have a team member who isn't thinking for myself, I guess I'd first understand what they want from this career. Like, do they want to be someone who turns up to do their job, gets paid what they're worth, and goes home, but there's no real growth there? If so, that is absolutely okay. It's valid. It's an important part of a company. But if they are someone who does want to progress, that's where we've got a problem, because what they want versus what they're currently delivering is not aligned. If I have a team that doesn't seem to think for themselves, the first place I would look would be when I'm in a meeting scenario, or say we are having a review session where we look at KPIs and we see, have we hit this KPI, yes or no? Who's bringing all the new ideas? Because if it's me, the manager, you're getting in everyone's way. You're a bottleneck. You should be asking more questions than you answer. So asking the team, okay, we haven't hit this KPI. What are we going to do next month to change that? We have hit this KPI, incredible. What did you do this month that you think got you there that we can do more of and we can bring into the rest of the team? I would really look at myself and my communication and think, am I just not giving space for anyone to come up with ideas? It's a really great concept by Liz Wiseman, where she talks about the accidental diminisher in a manager. And the concept of the ideas guy is someone who has loads of ideas, thinks they're always driving the team forward, they're always coming up with the next new thing. And they do that with the best intention. They think it's moving the team forward, but actually what's happening is there is no space for the team to come up with ideas. We don't give them room to jump in and help solve the problem. We don't give them space to fail, to come up with ideas that don't work and then learn from it and move on. And so if you have a team that don't seem to care about moving the team forward, and you feel like as a manager you're the only one who cares, you need to look at, are you leaving any space whatsoever for your team to actually bring anything in? Or are you going into these meetings being the one who talks the most, comes up with all the ideas, and then leaves with the team having a list of actions? And if that's the case, swap it to ask questions, dig in further, ask them to bring their ideas to the table.
So you're talking about this idea of like not being a hero, so not trying to solve other people's problems. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where by stepping back, you have inadvertently led to a project failure?
No. Every time I've stepped back, wonderful things happen. And I know it can feel scary, and we might see small failures. So for example, if I think about like some of the big clients that I work with, I have a member of my team managing the project. So she is writing the actions out, managing the project from start to finish, bringing together the right team members, holding people accountable. And that's like a big part of my business and what I do. And when I first handed that over to her, my first thought is fear of like, what if she sends a client email that isn't right and it, upsets a client? Or what if she is late with something? And the first few times I was like looking at the emails, checking the deadlines, and nothing went wrong. And so I just kind of let go. And even when things do go slightly quote unquote wrong, like maybe an email's not worded in the way that I would have, or maybe she's set up a call that maybe I wouldn't have, it doesn't lead to failure. It might, I might feed back and say, I think I would have done it a different way, but it's never led to failure. Like I have lots of positive evidence of letting go, it feeling really scary and awkward, watching someone do the thing that you would do a different way, but just really forcing yourself to let go and then letting them flourish eventually and finding their own way of doing it.
How do you personally cope with when you step back and you allow your team to make their own decisions and to do things in their own way, but the process and the getting to the results is much slower than what you expect it to be?
So I would always have probably got them to set deadlines at first. The best way to kind of delegate and set deadlines is to ask them, how soon do we think we can get this done? So then when they set their own deadlines, generally it gives them a lot more ownership over it. They are a lot more likely to hit it. So I think that problem for me is solved beforehand, just by giving people ownership over those deadlines. If they then were to miss their own deadline that they've set, I would be into, let's talk about communication. Because missing a deadline is not the worst thing in the world. We all have to do it. Maybe something's gone wrong. We have to move deadlines. The bit that doesn't work well is when someone doesn't communicate that they're about to miss that deadline. So say your team says, I'll get it to you by Friday, and you get there on Monday morning and there's nothing in your inbox. But if they'd have said, I'll get it to you by Friday, on Thursday or even Friday morning, they've realised, I actually am going to really run out of time to do this. Just drop you a message to say, I'm struggling to get it in. Can we extend it by a couple of days? So the problem isn't always missing the deadline. The problem is we've not communicated that we just need a bit of extra support and help. So I'd just be having that conversation with them. Like, we need to make sure our communication is right.
So encouraging independence from your team is fantastic. But how do you differentiate between empowering your team and then abandoning them to their own devices?
Systemization is the way I would always address that. Say we have a team of 5 people. Each of those people will have unique strengths, abilities, and talents. And there will be a layer of work that those people need to do that can be process-driven, automated, systemized. So let's say you've got someone in sales and they're calling up hot leads to try and convert them to get on a webinar. You can either have that person, like off their own bat, just go on that call every time and figure it out. And they might be a brilliant salesperson. Or you could say, let's create a script, a generic script that you don't have to stick to. But so we've got like the key bullet points that when you're on those calls, it makes it really successful that we hit. So it might be that we're asking questions about their goals, we're understanding their fears. We're then using a certain way of converting them depending on what they say. If you write up that script to automate that small part of the process so that now anyone can technically do it, like other people could get involved, what it does is levels that person up to be able to use. So instead of them using all their strengths and uniqueness to remember this script, to go through it again, to think about it, part of their job, let's say 30% of that sales call is now process driven. They've got it on a script. They don't need to remember it. They don't need to think about it. It might be, here's the 4-step sales process, and they take them through it. What you've done is freed up part of that person's brain to be even better on that call. So maybe they, I don't know, think of something really special from the last time they spoke to them, like, oh, I remember it was your child's birthday. How was it? Did you have fun? Or I remember something. So it frees up their brain to just create more wow for that client. So for me, how did you phrase it? So you said empower and something else.
So it's like, how do you balance empowering your team to be independent versus
like helping and supporting them,
or just not abandoning them to their own devices?
Yeah. So the bit that I would say is not abandoning them is that you have these standards that are written up in processes. So you say, this is the support you need. This is the training. Here's how we love it to be done. Here's how it's worked in the past. Here's what we'd love you to do. The bit then that you empower them, you give them autonomy, you give them freedom, is you take that process and you make it your own. You use your individual strengths to make it better. So on that call, you use other techniques that you've done in the past. You try and sell to them in a new way. And then when you do that, you can also then feed it back into the process so that the next person who does it can help do it even better as well. So for me, the hand-holding support training comes with systems, processes, and documents. And if you have a team, I read a stat just this morning that said only 20% of small businesses are ever system process driven. So there's a real opportunity there, a real win in your business if you start to focus on, every time we do something, let's systemize it. Let's write up a process, and a process can be as simple as 3 bullet points on a piece of paper, on a Word document. That's where we, like, quote unquote, hold the hand, is with those things. The rest of it, I would just say, this is where you're strongest. I'm going to leave you to your own devices to do this however you see best fit. So say if we were to use that same process with someone in marketing, say the social media manager, when they go to post something, you would have a document that was like, here's our checklist for posting, so we can take that bit of their brain away. So I know, for example, when I post, you want the captions to read a certain way. You maybe want a certain amount of hashtags. You maybe want to check you've ticked some boxes to check it adheres to your brand. That's the support, and that's the support we give them. That's where we say, this is what our standards are. This is what we need to do every time. Anything else, you use your individual set of skills and talents to go off and have fun and take autonomy and be empowered and do whatever it is you need. So if you've got a system-driven business, you can really hit the sweet spot between training, support, help, giving them the standards of your business, and freeing them up to also use their individual skill set to go off and do whatever it is they want to.
Part of a skill of being a very, very good manager and a leader is the ability to have difficult conversations when things go wrong. And this is something that you talk about a lot. This is something that we talked about in the previous podcast as well. But any tips or anything that you have learned maybe since our last conversation about how to have those difficult conversations? But before you answer that, maybe talk a little bit more about why having difficult conversations is important.
So I believe so many of our issues in life, whether it's with family, friends, people at work, situations that we're in that we don't want to be in anymore, could have been solved earlier by having a difficult conversation. It's important we have difficult conversations because of what we talked about earlier with Gen Z and transparency and honesty. It's important we have difficult conversations because it can help us set boundaries. There's a quote from Tim Ferriss that says, a person's success in life can be measured by how many uncomfortable conversations he or she is willing to have. And I really subscribe to that because there's been so many times earlier in my career and life where I have avoided a difficult conversation, and then it might be 6 months, a year, even 5 years later, it hasn't gone away. It is multiplied. It's keeping me up at night, and it's so much worse. And it's happened in relationships. It's happened with colleagues. It's happened with family. And so for me, having difficult conversations is probably the most important skill I see in a manager, in a leader. And if the first year in your management role, you just work on mastering that, I think you're going to be in a very good place, because it's so few people ever do it. The kind of theory behind having difficult conversations, the more practical side of it for me is, first of all, always have it in the moment. So when something arises, when that gut feeling arises, say someone says something in a meeting that upsets you a little bit, take them to the side immediately after that meeting and say, something you said in there just like made me feel really uncomfortable. Can we talk about it? Having that conversation then, if you think how many problems that can solve, they might come back to you and go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. When it's one-on-one, they're much more likely to like be empathetic. If you were to bring it up in a group setting, it might cause, I don't know, it might like stir the pot a bit, which I'm not against calling people out, but that can be scarier, and it might stop you having that conversation. If you do feel confident enough to call it out in the moment, then go for it. But it can feel much easier to have that conversation with them one-on-one. And I think we can actually get things solved a bit faster if we have that conversation one-on-one as well.
Can I just on that, because yes, I think dealing with things in a timely way is important, that you don't want to just like let it drag on. It sort of sits in your head and then you're like, oh, you know what, whatever, but there's still issues still there. But is there also a danger of, you know, like when you receive an email and then you just want to fire one on back and just acting out of like annoyance or frustration or anger and, you know, being like emotional about it, that actually your rational brain isn't really quite switched on, and you're probably better off just cooling off a little bit and then having that conversation?
Only in highly emotional situations. So this is where we have to learn to read ourselves. We have to learn to really understand our physical responses to our own emotions. So I now understand when I'm angry, like if something makes me angry, I will go warm, like the phrase, your blood boils. Like I do actually physically go quite warm, and I might sit there like kind of like hold like my fists a bit like this. And that happens rarely. But when it does, I know, okay, I'm gonna have to just sit this one out for 10 minutes or wait till tomorrow. The problem is people use that too often as an excuse to not have the conversation. So I once had a friend who was annoyed with me and another friend about something. She was upset about, I can't remember, it was like not being invited to something. This was a long, long time ago. Not being invited to something, and she was upset with me and one of my other friends. She just ignored us for 6 months, didn't say anything. And we tried to reach out to her, nothing had happened. We kind of just moved on a bit. You know, we were just like, no idea what's going on there. Let's just move on. This person then reached out to us the best part of a year later and said, I was just really angry and I didn't want to speak to you about it at the time. But she had then left it for 6 months to a year for it to fester, for her to like build more resentment, build more anger. And when the time came to have that conversation, me and my friend actually were like really confused, because we were like, what do you mean? The moment had passed. We were really confused as to what had been said, what had happened. We couldn't remember. We were like embarrassed, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry you felt like that. But I actually can't remember. Apparently it was like a conversation that someone had had. And so whilst, yes, when we are highly emotional, if that happens, be aware enough to just take a step back. But I would argue most of the time at work, the situation is not highly emotional enough to avoid it. And quite often we can use that as an excuse internally to say, I'll just deal with this tomorrow, or I'll just deal with this on Monday, you know, when they've had the weekend, or I'll just deal with this at the end of the week in the one-to-one because, you know, I'll let emotions calm down. The problem is it's you making that decision, and it's the person on the receiving end that is the one that needs to hear it in the moment. And so if you wait over the weekend, a week, maybe till the end of the month for the one-on-one, you're not really being fair to them, because, you know, say it gets to the end of the week, oh, something you said in the meeting on Monday made me feel uncomfortable. And they're like, I can't even remember. What did I say? Oh, I'm sorry. Why didn't you tell me at the time? Mm-hmm. And so I think it's more important for us to have those conversations. It's a more important thing for me that people actually have them than the risk of people having them in a too emotional state, because it just doesn't happen that often. But agreed, we need to be aware. And if ever, like, I've been angry at work before with a client. I got really angry once. And the team, it was something they'd said to the team, and I was so angry. And I just went and sat in a meeting room, and I was like, I just need half an hour to think about this. And if you've got a coach or a mentor or even a therapist or someone, maybe you can say, can we have a call this afternoon or tomorrow morning? Because I could really do with just thinking something out with you. Have that call and then go deal with it. But those situations, I would say, are rare.
I think having difficult conversations is difficult because it's very difficult to first even acknowledge what's happening in you internally, because partly why it's difficult is because it's caused some sort of discomfort inside you. And understanding that first, I think, is critical to being able to be like, okay, it's not about me, maybe I misinterpret it, and then having that sort of rational thought of being able to have a concrete conversation, as opposed to kind of like rushing in and being like, why did you say that to me? You've embarrassed me in front of everyone. How dare you? I mean, this is obviously an extreme, but, I think what happens in workplaces now, a lot of it becomes more passive aggressive rather than aggressive. So that fine balance of knowing how to phrase things, but also being able to work with what's going on with you internally. I think we're missing a trick there in terms of like workplace communication when it comes down to that. And I think it's for me personally, it's like managing your own emotions in the workplace is a really interesting topic.
So if you think about, emotional intelligence is a skill. If you think about someone and I don't know, maybe someone says to you, oh, you're really emotionally intelligent, or I think I'm emotionally intelligent. Just like confidence, just like inspiring people, just like being a great leader, it's a skill that we can learn. And there's a 5-step framework to being, quote unquote, emotionally intelligent. And the first step in that framework is understanding your own emotions. The second step is then taking control of those emotions. So step 1 is understanding your emotions, and anyone can do that. All we have to do is tune into it and become self-aware. We are feeling beings. We are thinking beings before we are communicative. We speak to each other. There are so many feelings that we can't yet describe with words. Language is so much newer than emotion and feeling is. I saw a great video the other day that explained how gossip is actually a survival mechanism between women, because when we have a gut feeling about somebody and we don't have the vocabulary to explain what it is. So say something felt strange, something felt off. We don't have the vocabulary. If we then go to a trusted friend and say, I felt a little bit awkward in that session the other day, and they go, me too, and actually on Thursday this thing happened. Someone else might go, yeah, and this thing happened as well. Together, you're kind of finding the language to explain what's happening inside with feelings. And this TikTok video is so good. It's this woman explaining how, like, gossip has almost been vilified amongst women because it's like you're all fighting against each other. And to an extent, obviously, bitchiness, gossiping at work, not good. We know that. But that's not to say, and I've definitely become, I don't know if it's a victim or just a proponent of this. Like, for years, I've just thought gossip is bad. And if anyone tries to gossip to me, I'm like, reject. I close off. I either say, let's go speak to that person about it, or I don't really feel comfortable with this conversation. I feel like I really went on a journey of not allowing gossip to be part of my life. And now I've started to just see it a bit differently, in that if someone needs to help me to find a way of explaining a feeling that we don't yet collectively have the words for, that's okay. The conversation then may end with, let's go and speak to that person about it. Or do we need to set a boundary with that person? Or is this the right person for the team? There was a really great example. There was a woman who came to work for us at Go Proposal years ago. She came in as a executive assistant, so kind of like mixture between PA, admin assistant person. She was with us for 2 months on probation, and then we had to let her go. I had to fire her because she essentially had lied about quite a few things, spending money. There was a lot of like really underhanded things happening behind the scenes, and it took me a few months to figure it out. I was very confidential about it, as you should be as a leader. The day it came to letting her go, I'd asked my colleague, we were a really small team at this point, I think 5 or 6 people in the whole business. I'd asked my colleague to go and take the rest of the team out for coffee because obviously everyone was in a really small office. So he then took them out for coffee. So I had the office with this person on my own, let her go. She left. It was really tricky. She left. The rest of the team then came back in. I'd explained to them what had happened. And the first thing the entire team did was, we knew that. I knew that was happening. There was something really wrong. Like there was something, something I felt really wrong that was happening there. Every single person had that same gut feeling. No one had expressed it. And it was a real wake-up call to me for like, we don't want gossip in a backhanded, bitchy, unhelpful way. But if you have a feeling that you can't describe, it can be so helpful to talk it out with someone that you trust and just to say, what do you think we should do? Do we need to set a boundary? Do we need to like have the conversation with the person? So yeah, my thoughts on gossip have really evolved recently. And so just kind of going back to emotional intelligence, for me now, I just really am attuned to physical responses to tell me how I'm feeling. Mm-hmm. So like we use the word gut feel and it seems a bit woo-woo or like intuition, blah, blah, blah. Gut feeling is a feeling inside you. Like it is a real thing feeling inside of you. And if I feel that, just go digging. Just be like, why is it that I feel this way? And it could be bias. It might not be helpful. It might be that you're just biased about something. Mm-hmm. And then you can dig into that as well and bring that bias up to the conscious. Or it might be that actually it's because you've got evidence of when someone has said that or done that before, it's led you down a bad path. But when you go digging, you can find that out. And so the first step in emotional intelligence is becoming aware. So like I said, when I get angry, and anger for me is quite rare. I'm not really an angry person. It takes a lot to annoy me. I'm very patient. But when I get nervous, when I get stressed, I can't sleep at night. And sometimes stress is not visible. Like I'll go to bed thinking, I'm not stressed. I'm fine. Everything's fine. And then I'll be waking up every hour. And that's my cortisol levels through the roof because I am stressed. Mm. And there's something that's worrying me. But I just haven't verbally, physically figured it out yet. And so become emotionally intelligent, start to be in tune with your emotions, be friends with them, and then you can start to control them. And for me, all controlling and managing your emotions looks like is leaving space between whatever triggered it and your response to it, to just give yourself time to process it. That's it. And it might be that you just need 5-10 minutes, or it might be that you need a day, but just leaving a bit of space.
Workplaces are such funny places. When I was talking to Isabel Berwick, who is the host of Working It podcast, and she was talking about how the workplace is getting angrier. Mm-hmm. I know you're saying that you don't feel angry, but it actually is getting angrier. How, people are frustrated and not really able to either express it or to really understand what's going on. And something that you said about gossiping and, trying to figure out like what is the thing that's actually bothering me. And that brings me on to core values. And I wonder if when you have that feeling of either annoyance or anger and you can't quite express it, and maybe you are going to like gossip with your colleagues, mm-hmm. that something feels off to you. So your company is saying our values are transparency, or our values are, open communication, or, people and service, or whatever it might be. But something doesn't quite feel like it's aligning to those values. And I wonder if that's what's making people annoyed, mm-hmm. and angry, and also unmotivated. So I know this is the work that you do a lot when it comes to core values. How do you reconcile what the company is saying their core values are to what they're actually doing?
Mm-hmm. So core values should always be built by the team. Your core values aren't necessarily the words you write on a PDF or on the wall. Your core values are the behavior that people uphold when the managers aren't around, or when senior leadership isn't around, the standards that people uphold. And so straight off the bat, I would always expect, and if you're a huge corporate, I would always expect the core values to have been built from the bottom up. And you can do it quite simply by just doing feedback surveys, understanding what the culture looks like, and using that to create the values and show the team that they have real ownership over them, because it's come from information within the team. If that's not the case and the core values already exist and the team kind of just have to use them, I would always start with small change. So start with the change you can make in your own team. So don't think this needs changing globally. Think, let me create something special within my team. Workshop the core values with your team. So say one of your values is honesty, but the team are like, this culture is not honest. Think, right, how do we make our team honest? And workshop it with your team to say, what does it look like to you? How can we, as a team unit of maybe 10 people, how do we get more honest with one another? What does honesty look like to you? Do we need to read books? Is there something we need to change? Where are we really good with honesty, and what should we keep? So in corporate, this goes for anything, core values or absolutely anything. You can't turn that ship around. Like, it's a huge ship. It's never going to be turned around. I've tried. You have to start small. You have to start with your own team. And you will then become this beacon of like positivity and hope within a huge organization, which is ultimately what happened to me. I couldn't change things on a global scale, but I could have great impact with the 30 people who were directly under my management. Mm-hmm. I could workshop the values with them, help them to become more honest with one another, become more transparent with one another, have this sense of freedom. Like, what does freedom mean to you? Is it, on a bigger scale, freedom looks like work from home, it looks like time flexibility, etc. But on a smaller scale, freedom also looks like when you have a task, you decide what your deadlines are. You get to decide in a working week what days you do certain things, what days you don't. If you get to decide whether you join that meeting or not. And so workshop, what does freedom look like in our team? What can I do to impact that? And just start there. And then people eventually will watch.
Do you think that Gen Z care more than any other generations about co-creating these values?
Yes. So the stats will show us that Gen Z care more than any other generation about the values of a company in general. I think that comes from the fact that media is so much more accessible now, and we have available to us so many polarized opinions, and as a result of that, we choose one and we stick to it. So yes, completely. However, there is definitely so in general, Gen Z care more about values, purpose, missions of companies than ever before, and they care a lot about if that doesn't align with their own, which I really respect and think is really important. However, I also think after the quiet quitting movement and people sort of disengaging from organizations because they can be so inauthentic and not transparent, we also have a movement that is, what's the point in values? Because you're not going to live up to them. So if you just merge those two things together, I believe there is a huge opportunity for organizations to set a vision, set a mission, set values that are driven by the team, owned by the team, and to win and play the long game in whatever industry they're in, because nobody is really doing it. You do have companies that are very mission purpose driven, but their values internally might not reflect what we see in their marketing. You also have companies who are incredibly values driven, but on the outside, their customers might not feel it. And I really think, and I get to see this on the ground every single day, and this is exactly what we did at Go Proposal. All behavior in the company, internally and externally, is driven by values. And the team create those values. They decide what they're going to be every year. They review them, decide what's going to be kept, what's going to be moved. They own them. They help hold each other accountable to them. And we talk about it. We get our clients to agree to them as well. We talk about them online. So I think there is a huge opportunity for companies who are willing to invest in values to really like excel among further than the rest. But you have to do it truly, like truthfully. You can't just have values written on a PDF, written on your wall. You have to integrate them into one-on-one systems, reward systems, hiring, firing. Like if you're not willing to fire someone because they don't uphold your values, there's no point in having them. Integrating it into all these systems, training, onboarding, helping each other, like feedback to one another on the values. If you're not willing to do any of that, there's no point. But to flip that on its head, there's a huge opportunity for organizations who are to win when it comes to people.
It's like also that rule is like, don't hire assholes.
Yeah. All that.
What's your focus on now, Heather Elkington? Leadership, Heather.
So my big mission and vision for my company, Fresh Leadership World, is we're building a world where everyone loves the work they do. I truly believe that if we build so having unhappy employees, anxious employees benefits no one. The company, it doesn't benefit the company, it doesn't benefit the managers, it doesn't benefit business, economies, profits in any way. It also, obviously, unhappy employees doesn't benefit them because in no way can their work help with their life. They're anxious at the weekend, they're anxious in the evening. They don't feel inspired by work in any way. So creating unhappy employees, which is generally across the board what we have at the minute, benefits nobody in the economic cycle. But even bigger than that, if you think about all the polarization we have in politics, war, hate crimes, like all the really kind of deep problems we have in society at the minute, I think can be solved by happy employees, people who that the majority of their life spent at work, if that complemented their life, made them feel empowered, made them feel happy, made them love other people, we could stop a lot of the hate in the world. Work can negatively impact people's mental health in a really deep way, but it can also do the opposite. And I was a product of the opposite. I had some difficult workplaces in the early days and then moved into a workplace that really supported my growth, that allowed me to be the person I wanted to be, gave me freedom, allowed me to flourish, and it impacted my life in every single way, happiness in every single way, and it benefited the organization as well. So my mission is to build a world where everyone loves the work they do. I am continuing to work with big companies on cultural transformation, whether that be in core values, so using all those systems, implementing those systems within companies. So I'm just on the third company I'm doing that for now, and we've had some great transformation so far, or through really solid leadership training to ensure that all leaders across the company, middle managers right up to the VPs, EVPs, C-suite, are bringing those values to life and just building workplaces that encourage happiness in employees.
Well, I'm so on board with your mission because like being a headhunter and seeing people struggle in their work and wishing to leave, or finding the people who really are very ready to step into, you know, something completely brand new that's much more aligned with what they want to do. Like that really brings me happiness and joy. And I absolutely believe that if you really align your strengths and your abilities and what you enjoy with the work you do, not only are you happier, the company does better, and we just do better overall. So I wish you all the best in your, you know, amazing mission, and love watching you on Instagram and reading your newsletter, which is fantastic. And thank you for coming onto the show again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Loved it.
I am bringing Anatomy of a Leader live to a venue in London. If you'd like to be the first to find out about it, please make sure that you follow the link in the show notes to be added to the waitlist. And don't forget to subscribe or follow the show wherever you're listening.